Hello, friends. Once upon a time, a girl named Felicity and a boy named Peter moved to New York and bought an abandoned 1830s farmhouse. And although work has pretty much slowed to a halt on the house in the last few weeks and started up again last week, I told you all in one of my previous videos that my goal for this year was to read more. I've actually been reading quite a lot that's related to the house and homesteading and the history of this area of New York. So, since I think many of you might also be readers, and I know Kate is because she and I have been talking about books over email, I thought it would be fun to talk about what I have been reading and see if any of it might inspire you to see if there's a copy at your local bookstore. So let's see, I have three categories. I have building things in stone, local history, and kind of garden design, homesteading, crafting. So I think I'll start with the history one first. This is a fantastic book. It's from the local library. It's called The White Woman and Her Valley. And it was written in the 50s by a newspaper man named Arch Merrill. And reading about Arch Merrill, he has published something like 24 books about Rochester and the surrounding area, which is crazy to me. He's passed away now. I wish that I could read you in full this story that I'm going to tell you because it is fantastic. And I'm starting to realize this is the second book that I have read by a newspaper man that was written in the 50s or 60s. And I really like their style. It's direct and interesting and funny and turns of phrases that you don't hear these days. But unfortunately, since this was published in 1954, it is not out of copyright, and I did not have time to contact whoever is responsible for this and get permission to read the story in full. So the story I'm going to retell to you, I just think this is wild, is called The Sea Serpent, and it takes place southwest of Rochester in 1855. This small little town was really reliant on the tourist trade, and in the summer of 1855, the tourist trade was not happening. There was nothing going on. So one night, these 4 men and 2 sons went out in a rowboat, respectable members of the community, not drinking, really solid, upright citizens. They came rowing back to the shore of Silver Lake an hour later, talking about having seen a Loch Ness monster-esque sea serpent in the lake. And the countryside went nuts, right? These were really respectable people. They swore that this thing had come out of the water, that it had chased them back to shore. And then the next night, there were some fishermen out. They saw it too. Everybody swore there was an affidavit, and word got out, and everybody came to see the sea serpent, right? So in the one sense, tourism was great. People came. They were very curious about this. People tried hunting it. They tried baiting it. They tried all this crazy stuff to get it to come out. People saw it. There was like a whale harpoonist that came and got a couple shots off at it. And then all of a sudden, like right at the height of the frenzy, the sea serpent disappeared and was never seen again. And the locals refused to go into the lake for a long time after the scare because they didn't know what had happened to the sea serpent. And then 2 years later, a hotel burned down. And in the attic of the hotel, the volunteers who were there to help put the fire out, found a curious contraption that looked very like a sea serpent, made out of wire and like waterproof canvas that was painted in frightening colors. And apparently, the whole story then came out 2 years later. A local hotelman had wanted to drum up business, and so he and some friends spent several nights, again, 1855, building a sea serpent. And they had an air hose that went to a shanty on the shore. And the air hose is how they affected its buoyancy to come up and out of the water. And they also had a couple of ropes, apparently, from it to different places on the shore so they could direct it anywhere they wanted to go. And they were doing a crack bang business, but they realized that they were causing real fear and panic in the community. And they were also really terrified of what would happen if they got caught. So they called it off, and then 2 years later, they were exposed when these firefighters discovered the evidence of the sea serpent in this attic, and they just let it burn with the rest of the building. I don't know if you guys are going to be able to see this, but this is the drawing from one of the newspapers of the time. I just thought that was so crazy. Not that people in 1855 were gullible, because let's be honest, people today believe some really crazy things as well. But more that people had that kind of ingenuity in 1855. I mean, the kind of technical engineering required to pull off something like that and to have it be seen so that people, solid, respectable members of the community would swear to having seen it, but not get caught. I mean, that's pretty impressive. I don't know how many people today would just be able to pick up that knowledge and do it. So I thought that was great. That was just one of the stories in here. This is a fantastic book. I learned so much, and I am really looking forward to seeing what other books of his the local library has. So if you are at all interested in the Finger Lakes history, there's a story about a fox hunt. It's one of the oldest in the country. The book is named after a white woman who became part of one of the local Indian tribes and lived there for like 60 years. There's a really cool story about Letchworth. Letchworth State Park is very famous around here. He was a humanitarian, great guy. So anyway, if you're interested in the Finger Lakes area, this book I really enjoyed, and anything by Arch Merrill, Archmerrill, I would put on your list. So that was really fun local history reading. I have a couple other local history books as well. One of them actually was a book written by somebody who lived in Romulus, which is the tiny town 2 towns north of us. From his early childhood in the 1900s there, his dad worked on the railroad that came through, and that was also a fascinating read. I don't have it in front of me. So that was the history section. Now let's talk about stone building, because this has been my obsession. I saw an article from Mother Earth News. I don't generally read the Mother Earth emails that I get, and I don't get the magazine, but the headline really caught my attention because it was about building in stone, which is something I had not looked into before. And the article recommended 3 resources to learn more. 2 of them were in my local library section. So one of them is called The Forgotten Art of Building a Stone Wall. And the other one sadly no longer has its dust jacket, but it's called The Owner Builder's Guide to Stonemasonry. Both of these were written in the 50s, 60s, I believe, and they are fabulous. They're very straightforward. They're both in black and white. They're very straightforward, and they gave me a lot of great ideas. This one is about building walls, and then this one is about building, retaining walls, house walls, building walls, basically anything out of stone. And now I'm on a kick because I've been thinking, and you guys can tell me if you think this is crazy. We want to put a cottage somewhere on the property, and I had been thinking of building it tiny house style with wood. But the author of the article, the original article, makes some really cogent arguments for stone. Namely, if you can get a lot of it inexpensively or for free, it's a fantastic building material. It doesn't rot. It is fairly insulative, especially if you build it with some insulation, which this book talks about. So yeah, these were 2 fabulous books. I have now finished both of them. Frankly, I will probably reread both of them. The big thing with stone construction is time, right? And time and understanding gravity. A lot of these stone walls, all of the stone walls actually, they just use mortar to hold the stones together, but the mortar is not weight bearing or load bearing. That's the job of the stones, to be stacked on top of each other. So having been fascinated with castles pretty much my whole life, and I have visited several of them, probably dozens of them, when I was doing my travels abroad when I was a digital nomad, I think it would be really cool to build something with stone. I'm not yet sure. Around here, there's a lot of dry fitted stone foundations. And in fact, that's what we have. Ours is filled in with mortar, but ours is a flat stone fieldstone foundation. So yeah, I'm really excited to read more about this. This book also talked about a lot of kind of developing theories about how to use concrete and stone together. Again, this book came out in the 50s, so those theories are probably a little bit out of date, but it gave me a lot more reading material. So if you have any interest at all in building in stone, and that's never crossed your radar before now, highly recommend both of these books. The Forgotten Art of Building a Stone Wall with Curtis P. Fields. No relation, by the way. My last name is also Fields, but I'm not related to this man. And then this one is called The Owner Builder's Guide to Stonemasonry. It's actually written by 3 people, all of whom are professionals in the stone space, and I will put all of these titles and the link to the original Mother Earth News article in the description below. So that has been my second obsession, along with history. And then the third category is the one most directly related to homesteading, so I have left that one for last. I have already thanked Kate for sending me this book, which is drawn from New England. by about Tasha Tudor by her daughter Bethany, but I finally got around to reading it. And oh my gosh, you guys, Tasha Tudor is a very famous illustrator, but she was also a workhorse. She wanted to have a farm. She was obsessed with life in the 1850s. She had a farm. She did the kid thing. She was incredibly creative. She was great at sewing. She was great at marionettes. She cooked all their own food. She helped on the farm. I mean, even with 4 kids, I don't know how she did it all. This book was fabulous, and I can totally see why it would inspire someone to live that kind of life. To me, it inspired me to start doing some more creative stuff. Learning to draw has been on my list for a really long time. I am terrible at it. I draw stick figures okay, and that's about it. So this rekindled my desire to someday learn how to draw and sketch. But this was absolutely fabulous. So thank you, Kate, for sending me this book. And then the other book Kate had recommended was a book called Bean Blossom Dreams. And the couple in this book, he is a world-trotting corporate photographer, and she is a writer in 1990, I think. And they decided to move from Chicago to their farm. Being city folk, never had a farm before, and they thought, why would we wait till we retire to have the dream? Why not pursue the dream now? What was interesting to me about this book, it was, first of all, it was really good reading, as I expected. But 1990, this was still very fringe, right? It wasn't as common. You know, people didn't talk about homesteading then the way that they talk about homesteading now. And I just thought this was a really interesting look into kind of like when it was becoming a little bit more popular. Also, there were no YouTube videos and internet resources, right, in 1990 and 1994. So she talks about, you know, doing her work by fax machine because she's a professional writer for various magazines, a former BBC producer, that kind of stuff. And, you know, having your neighbor's phone number just memorized and calling them, and just a different experience. I was 7 in 1990 when the book is set, and it was published, I think, in 1994. So it's a part of my life that I obviously remember from my own childhood, but not from an adult perspective. So Bean Blossom Dreams, I would highly recommend. It's not terribly preachy. It is both funny, it's sad. I definitely cried at a couple of spots because, of course, animals die, and you have to get used to that, and you have to write about it. So I loved this. I actually started it the day I picked it up from the library, and I got, I don't know, 20 pages in or something. I thought, yeah, okay, this is going to be great when I'm in the mood. And then I picked it up 2 days later on a Sunday morning, and I finished the entire book in a single sitting. So thank you, Kate, for this recommendation. Again, this is Bean Blossom Dreams by Sallyann J. Murphey. I looked her up, by the way. She never wrote any more books, which is super sad because she's an amazing writer. And the only thing I could find was that in 2013, her daughter had gone off to college. Her daughter's 5 or 6 in the book. And that she herself, the author, had started teaching at a local high school. But it was super frustrating to not find out more about the farm and how it had progressed in the 35 years since the book 35 years since the book was published. Oh boy. Okay. And then the last book that I technically haven't finished reading yet, but I wanted to record for you guys, is this book, The Home Scale Forest Garden. This is by Dani. What is Dani's last name? Dani Baker. I read this in Tulsa a few years ago, and it was on my Christmas wish list because the gal lives in upstate New York. She's probably only 3 or 4 hours drive from me. So going to visit her and seeing her edible food forest is definitely on my to-do list this year. But one of the things I love about her is she talks about how to design a food forest garden, which I already know. But then a lot of the book is about specific species she recommends for the climate that she lives in, because that's where she has her experience. And now that we live in New York and share a very similar climate, I think we're a half zone different, if I remember correctly. I think they're a little bit colder than we are here. So this has been absolutely fabulous. The pictures in this thing, you guys, are gorgeous. Let me see if I can find one for you that is just absolutely delightful. Yeah, look at that. Look at that picture. So I've been reading this at night. This is sort of my falling asleep book. I like to read about a couple different types. I'm not reading to remember at this point. I think I'm probably going to go back through here and write quite a few things down. But one of the things that's really helpful is where she lives, there's a lot of clay in her soil. There's a lot of clay in our soil as well. If you have never read about food forests, there are only a couple books out there about food forests, and I think actually hers is the most approachable. she did not do anything with gardening until she retired from her, I think it's psychiatry practice, or something like that. So she came to it as her retirement project. So she's more able to speak to the beginner, I think, than some of the other folks who've gotten a little bit wrapped up in their own experiences. So if you are looking for a book that talks about what food forests are, and then if you live somewhere in the North Country, her specific recommendations would also be very useful for you. So this is, I'm so excited Peter got me for this for Christmas. I can't even tell you. So that's it. That's it for the list of things that have read. I am also currently working my way through a young adult quartet, which has nothing to do with homesteading, but is pretty much like the YouTube equivalent of just letting my brain turn off in the evening, but it's super fun to read. And so even though it's been really frustrating not to move forward with the house, I have been making progress on my goal to read a lot more this year, and that feels good. So if you have read anything lately that you thought was absolutely phenomenal, either related to these books or just something that you think I should look up and see if my local library has, please let me know in the comments below. And if you have any questions about any of the books that I referenced here, let me know. And then finally, let me know if you want more videos like this. This is a little bit unusual for me. Never done one of these before. So if this is of interest to you, please let me know so that I know to continue letting you guys know as I read cool things. So that's it for me. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you soon in my next video. Bye for now.